Okay, so this is 8-2, day 2. We're doing 30, 60, 90 triangles. Now, it's very much like what we did yesterday. There's a pattern involved, but you got to pay attention to it because this pattern is specific to the angles that are in the triangle itself. So I've got a 30, 60, 90, and then a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Length of the hypotenuse is twice the length of the shorter leg. The length of the longer leg is the square root of 3 times the length of the shorter leg. I just got to get myself a little pointer here. Okay, the length of the longer leg is the square root of 3 times the length of the shorter leg. Hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg. Longer leg is the square root of 3 times the short leg. So the short leg runs the show. This is the short leg. Short legs are opposite the smallest angle in the triangle, shortest leg. That makes sense. And then I take the short leg, multiply it by the square root of 3, and I get the longer leg opposite the bigger angle. And the longest side, which is the hypotenuse, is 2 times that short leg. And that's my pattern. That's the pattern I'm going to use here. So if my short leg is 3, my hypotenuse is 2 times that, so that becomes 6. If my short leg is 3, my long leg is 3 times the square root of 3. Now I want you to try yours on the next two because, hey, it's a pattern. It's the same stuff. It's just different numbers that we're using. Okay, hopefully you found that that was going to be 10, that was going to be 5 to the square root of 3, that was going to be 14, and that was going to be 7 to the square root of 3. All I'm doing is taking the short leg, multiplying by 2 for the hypotenuse, the short leg, multiplying by the square root of 3 for the longer leg, the short leg, multiply by 2 for the hypotenuse, the short leg, multiply by the square root of 3 for the longer leg. Now, as we go on, we got another one, another way of looking at this. If I'm given the hypotenuse, the hypotenuse. If I'm given the hypotenuse, that means if I take half the hypotenuse, I get to be at the shorter leg. And then I take that shorter leg and get the longer leg by multiplying the shorter leg by the square root of 3. So half of 8 is 4, and 4 times the square root of 3 is the longer leg. Please notice that this is all about patterns and all about you memorizing the pattern itself. So make sure you're comfortable with it and make sure you recognize the short leg is always opposite the 30-degree angle. The longer leg is always opposite the 60-degree angle. And the hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle. So now in number 5 and 6, you should be able to get those quickly. Go ahead. Now, getting this done, half of 12 is the short leg, 6. 6 times the square root of 3, which is right there, 6 to the square root of 3. Half of 4 is 2, and 2 times the square root of 3 is 2 to the square root of 3. Another way of looking at this, if I've given you a measure on the longer leg in terms of square root of 3. So this makes it quite quick because the 5 to the square root of 3 is the longer leg. The short leg times the square root of 3 makes this longer leg. Short leg must therefore be 5. And then since this is 5, 2 times the short leg is 10. And now that we know our pattern, go for 8 and 9. So we're looking over here at 8 and 9, and we got longer leg, short leg, hypotenuse. Okay? Longer leg, short leg, hypotenuse. So these are all going great and everybody just loves these first 9. But now, what happens if I give you a value in the longer leg that doesn't have a square root of 3? The square root of 3 is eaten up by the value inside. So we've got to be thinking, what was the math that allowed me to do this? When we had the short leg, let's call the short leg x. We took the short leg, multiplied it by the square root of 3, and we got to the value 9 here. Now, in order to reverse that, we have to divide by the square root of 3. So I'm going to divide by the square root of 3. So dividing by the square root of 3, I get myself here to the short leg as 9 divided by the square root of 3. Well, in Expo, you found out that you needed to make that pretty and take and multiply by a form of 1 based on the denominator here, right there. So that way, when you went through this, you were able to see 9. I want to stay with my color for 9. Let's make 9 black here. Okay, so if I stay with 9, the square root of 3 over 3. Now, what I want to make sure you recognize is that we're looking at this pattern with the longer leg and how it's related. Because all the stuff we've done up to this point was all about a pattern, all about us just kind of knowing what we're going to be doing to achieve that pattern. To go from the longer leg back to the short leg, I multiply the longer leg by the square root of 3 and then divide by 3. So it's going to be 3 the square root of 3. That's my value of x. So that's what will happen down here. It's going to be 3 the square root of 3. And that kind of makes sense. But then once I get 3 to the square root of 3 for my shorter leg, I know that my hypotenuse is twice that, which is 6 the square root of 3. Now, we're going to try this again. We're going to try to show you the pattern and see if you can use the pattern on problem 12. So again, coming up with my x here, my short leg. So my short leg times the square root of 3 is equal to, in this case, 4. If I divide by the square root of 3, the square root of 3 is dividing. Okay, so now I've got x is equal to 4 the square root of 3, but I'm going to multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 again to make it look pretty, because it's driven by what's in the denominator. And my answer here becomes 4 times the square root of 3 divided by 3. It's still the same thing. It's the square root of 3 divided by 3 times 4. So I take my longer leg, divide it by 3, and then multiply it by the square root of 3 to get my short leg. That's my answer, and I double that to get my hypotenuse. So now, without using the math, can you identify the pattern? So it'd be the longer leg times the square root of 3 divided by 3 is my short leg. And then I double that, and I get 22 the square root of 3 over 3. And that's a 30, 60, 90 triangle pattern. Okay, you can still totally go, hey, you know, I got this, x to the square root of 3 is equal to 11, and then you could divide by the square root of 3, the square root of 3, and know that that next step, as you're looking at this, you're going to get that 11, and you can get x over the square root of 3, well, you're going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, and gosh, you know, it's still going to be your final answer, 11, the square root of 3 all over 3. And wait, that's what it was. Weird. We figured out the pattern. So just make sure that you're focusing on that. That pattern should be in your notes. Now let's look at 8-2 day 1 notes. We did this. But in 8-2 day 2 notes, we're going to do these. I want you to give them a try. Go. I will wait for you to get those done. Or actually, when you're done, you're going to turn it back on. This is just, do you get it? Okay. All right, welcome back. We're finding the missing parts. And now the triangles are all spun around. They're in different spots. So this is my short leg right here. Okay, that's my short leg that I'm working with right here. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times the square root of 3 is 8 the square root of 3. So this is 16. This is 8 the square root of 3. We're all good. I got a 60. Now, I've got 8 the square root of 5. I know it's a square root of 5. I know we haven't done that before, but hey, it's a square root. You know, we're just using it as another number. It's a hypotenuse, so half the hypotenuse is my short side. My short side is always opposite my 30-degree angle, so this is 4 to the square root of 5. Now, 4 to the square root of 5 times the square root of 3 is my longer leg, so 4 to the square root of 5 times the square root of 3 is my longer leg, which is 4 to the square root of 15. That's x, okay? Maybe what we ought to do is clean that up a little bit. And we'll just say that that is equal to x. X is equal to that, y is equal to that. This is u, this is v, and we're off to the races. Now, I got another 30, 60, 90 triangle. My longer leg is 5 to the square root of 3, so that makes it really nice that this and this are both 10 and 5 for my y and x. Now I'm looking at 12, and it almost is identical to 11 if I'm thinking about stuff. So y is 5 and x is 5, the square root of 3. And 13, holy cow, 45, 45, 90. So exciting because the hypotenuse is 8 the square root of 2, and you take your legs and multiply them by the square root of 2 to get your hypotenuse. So v is equal to 8, and u is also equal to 8. Okay, because it's an isosceles right triangle. And now I'm looking at 14, which is 12 the square 12 on my longer leg. And to go from the long leg to the short leg, I multiply the long leg by the square root of 3 and divide by 3, and that becomes 4 the square root of 3. That's what y is. Now I double that short leg, and that becomes 8 the square root of 3. Now I'm looking at 15, and I have the value of 3. To get to my short leg from the hypotenuse, I cut the hypotenuse in half, and it's 3 divided by 2. I take my value of b, 3 divided by 2, multiply it by the square root of 3, and I get my longer leg, 3 square root of 3 divided by 2. My last one here in 16, I have 11 the square root of 3 on my longer leg. Notice how I'm identifying which one's which. That's opposite the 60-degree angle. Well, I just take away, I divide out that square root of 3, and that's 11, and now a is 22. Now, I hope those went well for you, and as we're looking through these others, we are looking at doing some more stuff. I would like to have you get to page 12. And on page 12, we are reviewing your square roots. And I want you to just go ahead and get those done right now. And then we'll bring those back up because we got several that we need to do. And we'll get those done here on page 12. Okay, welcome back. Some of these are perfect squares. This is 11. Okay, but some of them aren't, like 52. Is 4 times 13, if you're familiar with cards and suits. Okay, 4 times 13. So I got the square root of 4, the square root of 13, so this is 2 the square root of 13. 45 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 5, which is 3 the square root of 5. 72, you know, a lot of people look at this as 9 times 8, but that is not necessarily the whole picture. 72 is 36 times 2. So it's 6 the square root of 2. We're looking at 40. We did 40 before on the other sheet. 4 and 10. I got 2 the square root of 10. And 27 is the square root of 9, the square root of 3, which is 3 the square root of 3. We're looking at 80, which is the square root of 16, the square root of 5, which is 4 the square root of 5. We got 50, if I have the square root of 25, the square root of 2, which is 5 the square root of 2. Now, every one of these I've been factoring in my head to get things done. And now we're at a point right now that it's kind of like, holy cow, what's going on next? I got 243 here. And if I add 2, 4, and 3, these are all divisible. That's 9. That's divisible by 9. So 9 goes into this. So I'm thinking that I've got either 9 or 81 in this. And I see 3. So I'm going to divide by 3. And if I got 243 divided by 3, I get 81. So hey, that's cool. I got 81, the square root of 3, and 9 the square root of 3. And 288, that looks like 144 times 2. So I've got the square root of 144, the square root of 2. This is 12, the square root of 2. 320 is a little tougher. That's 2 times 160. So if I factor this out on the side, I got 2 times 160, and I got 2 times 80, and I got 2 times 40, and I got 2 times 20, and I got 2 times 10, and I got 2 times 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I got 6 2s, 6 sets of 2s, so I got 64 times 5. Wow, that's what that is. 2 to the 6th power is 64. So I got 64 and 5. So I got 8 square root of 5. And we'll get rid of this because it's in the way of the other problems. Now, 255, that ends in 5. And that's 255. So that's 51. So that's 5 times 51 is 255. Okay, 51 is 3 times 17. That's it. Done. That's done. I can't do anything more because I got 5 times 3 times 17. Those are the values that will bring me to 255. I've got 5 times 3 times 17. Okay, so that's done. 64 minus 28. Now, I want you to look at this as x and y's. Okay, I got to get them to like square root us. And what I mean by that is this. 64 is 8, right? And square root of 28 is square root of 4 to square root of 7. So it's 8 minus 2 to the square root of 7. Now this is the best I can do because I cannot combine unlike terms without a calculator here. But the purpose of this is get the square root. If you have the similar square roots, you can add the coefficient in front of the square root together. So if I got 242, okay, and that's 121 times 2. So I got 121 square root of 2, like that. And then over here I've got 100, the square root of 2. So I've got 11, the square root of 2, plus 10, the square root of 2. Because the square root of 2's are the same in that idea that it's like x, I can add now 11 and 10 and have 21, the square root of 2 be my final answer here. Notice I'm just adding how many square root of 2's. In 21, I have the square root of 4, the square root of 5, plus the square root of 9, the square root of 5, minus the square root of 5. I have 2 the square root of 5, plus 3 the square root of 5, minus 1 square root of 5. And now I have 5 minus 1, which is 4, the square root of 5 for my final. My last thing I'm doing here, I'm going to be multiplying square roots together, and I've got 121 times 3, and I've got the square root of 3 times 100. So now I've got 11 times 3 times 10 for my final answer to help me out here. So I've got 330 to finally get there. In 27, I've got the square root of 21, the square root of 24. I'm just going to break them down. I've got the square root of 7 times the square root of 3, and I got the square root of 3, the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And the reason I wrote it that way, 24 is 3 times 4 times 2, but these become 3. This is 2, so it's 6. The square root of 14, that stays underneath. And here I've got 5 times 2 times 2 times 2, so 40 is my final answer. And I'm looking in 33, and you got 64 times 3, because this is 8 times 8, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, and that's 64 times 3, which is going to pop out to be 192. And there's one on these last ones. I got 10 times the square root of 11, the square root of 11, and I've got another 10 out front. So it's 100 times 11, which is 1100. And my final one, I just got to make it pretty, which is 4 to the square root of 3 over 3. I hope those things are going well. If you're not, make sure you get in early and often, and we'll see what we can do on the flip side. Today's assignment is that worksheet that you had for day 2 for this. And we will get to page 13 at a later time. Have yourself a great day.